Let's talk about a case study that every single security professional knows, or at least should know: Heartland Payment Systems. Back in 2008, one of the biggest payment processors in the world got hit, and the story of how it happened is a masterclass in the dangerous gap between being certified as compliant and actually being secure.
It all boils down to this one staggering number: 130 million. That's how many credit and debit card records were stolen. At the time, it was the largest data breach of its kind ever reported. I mean, just let that sink in. The scale was absolutely massive.
And here's the kicker, the part that makes this whole story so important. Heartland had passed its audits. They were officially certified as compliant with the payments card industry data security standard. They were, by all accounts, doing exactly what the industry told them they needed to do.
So that's the big question, right? That's what we're going to break down today. How did a skilled attacker and his team manage to just live inside a certified secure network for almost a year, quietly siphoning out data while every single compliance checkbox was ticked? Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting. The story doesn't even start with the hack itself. It starts with the discovery. And the crucial part is, Heartland didn't find the attackers? Nope, somebody else did. This created an unbelievable 10-month blind spot where the theft was just happening, day in and day out.
Just look at this timeline. It's wild. The attackers get their first foothold on December 26, 2007. But it's not until 10 months later, October 2008, that Visa's fraud detection systems pick up some weird patterns and give Heartland a call. There were no internal alarms, no alerts, nothing from Heartland's own security stack flagged the intrusion. The call came from outside the house.
All right, so how on earth did they pull this off? Let's deconstruct the entire kill chain step by step. We're going to follow the attacker's exact path, all the way from a public-facing website right into the very core of their payment processing network. You know, the attack followed a pretty classic playbook, really. 4 main phases. It started with getting that initial access, that first foot in the door, then moving sideways across the network to find the real prize. After that, they set up their data collection, and finally, they started the slow, patient process of sneaking it all out. So where did it all begin? With some super sophisticated zero-day exploit? Not even close. It all started right here. A single, common, and completely preventable SQL injection vulnerability on one of their corporate websites. This thing had apparently been there for years, missed by audit after audit. That was the open door. Okay, so they're in the corporate network. Now what? This is the pivot. This is how they made the jump. They used a tool called FGDump to get a hold of the NTLM password hashes. Because NTLM is an older, weaker algorithm, they could take those hashes offline and just crack them, revealing the plain text passwords. And here's the absolute killer mistake. Those same user credentials were valid on the supposedly separate high-security payment processing network. That one pivot, that was the key to the kingdom. So once they were inside that payment network, the attackers unleashed their primary weapon, a packet sniffer. If you're not familiar, just think of it like a digital wiretap. It's a piece of software that just sits on the network and listens to all the data flowing past it. Now, you're probably thinking, okay, a sniffer is bad, but surely the payment data was encrypted, right? Well, this is the part of the story that is just chilling. The answer is they didn't have to break any encryption at all. See, Heartland did the right thing by encrypting data at rest in their databases, but they made a fatal assumption that their internal network was a trusted space. So data moving between their own servers was sent completely unencrypted, in plain text. The packet sniffer didn't need a key, it just had to read the open mail. With that sniffer in place, the rest was just a logistics problem for the attackers. The malware grabbed everything they needed: card numbers, names, expiration dates. It dumped all that data into staging files, and then, over many months, they slowly trickled it out in small batches to servers in Eastern Europe, all to avoid tripping any alarms. Which brings us right back to that central nagging question. If all of this was going on, how in the world did they keep passing their PCI audits? This, right here, is the compliance paradox. I mean, this quote really just says it all, doesn't it? The compliance system was built to check for security controls at one specific moment in time. But it completely failed to account for a persistent adversary who was actively working against them every single day. This chart visualizes the problem perfectly. Think about it. An audit is a snapshot. It's a high-intensity check that happens, maybe once a year? But an attacker, that's a continuous threat. It's a constant, low-level pressure 24/7. A periodic check-in is simply no match for a persistent adversary.
So let's get down to brass tacks. We can distill this entire incident down to 5 specific critical failures. These are the root causes that made this whole catastrophe possible. You can really group them together. You've got the technical failures, that initial SQL injection, the missing internal encryption, the weak network segmentation that let them pivot, and a total lack of internal monitoring to see what was happening. And then, hanging over all of it, was the cultural failure, confusing compliance with actual security.
All right, so we've diagnosed the failures. Let's talk solutions. Let's build the blueprint for a modern defense. What are the specific, actionable controls that would have stopped this exact attack chain in its tracks?
First, you stop them at the front door with solid application security. Using parameterized queries in your code makes that kind of SQL injection basically impossible. Integrating automated security scanning right into your development pipeline would have flagged this vulnerability long before it went live. And finally, a web application firewall, or WAF, acts as another critical layer of defense. Any one of these would have stopped phase 1 cold. Okay, next, how do you prevent that lateral movement and the data theft itself? Well, end-to-end encryption is non-negotiable. It makes sure data is never in plain text on the network, which makes a packet sniffer useless. Tokenization is even better. It replaces real card numbers with worthless tokens, so even if data gets stolen, it's garbage. And finally, strict microsegmentation, with totally separate credentials, would have made that jump from the corporate to the payment network impossible.
And finally, how do you shrink that 10-month blind spot down to mere hours or days? You need modern threat detection. A SIM with behavioral analytics would flag weird activity, network detection tools would spot that lateral movement, and file integrity monitoring would have sent an immediate alert the second that Sniffer malware was dropped onto a server.
Look, if you take only one thing away from this entire breakdown, please let it be this. Compliance is the starting line. It's the absolute bare minimum. It is the floor upon which a real security program must be built. It is not, and it never can be, the ceiling. And that leaves us with one final question to ask ourselves about our own systems. Are we just ticking boxes to pass an audit? Or are we building a resilient, layered, continuous defense that's actually designed to withstand a real adversary? Because the answer to that question, well, that's the difference between being certified and being secure.